Last episode, the dollar was losing its throne. Sanctions misfired. Russia traded in yuan. Foreign central banks bought gold faster than at any point in 50 years. But there is a move almost nobody is talking about. A law passed in 2025, so quiet, most economists missed it. It built the dollar a new bodyguard out of the very thing meant to kill it. You're watching Curious Minds. Let's begin. Today, 3 things. The law that flipped the script on crypto. The hidden machine it built underneath the dollar, running every second, paying for the US government, almost no one watching, and the question that haunts the bond market: what happens if this shield ever cracks? For 10 years, the story was simple. Crypto was the rebellion. Bitcoin would replace the dollar. Stablecoins would rout around the banks. The Treasury would lose control of its own currency. That was the threat every regulator feared. Then, in July 2025, the United States did something nobody expected. It absorbed the threat. It wrote crypto into law and made the law work for the dollar. To understand the move, you need one definition. A stablecoin is a digital dollar. It is issued not by the government, but by a private company. One token equals $1. The biggest issuers are called Tether and USDC. Together, they hold over $300 billion in circulating tokens. That number is larger than the dollar reserves of most central banks on the planet, and it was built without a single regulator signing off. For years, regulators stared at this market with quiet panic. Private money, pegged to the dollar, no federal oversight, no reserve standards, no audits. If one of these companies collapsed, the panic could spread across global finance in a single night. So the question became binary: ban them and lose the digital dollar to Singapore or Dubai, or rewire them. Bend the entire industry into a shape that served the United States, not undermined it. Banning would have been a disaster. The companies would move offshore in a month. Hong Kong, Switzerland, Singapore, all ready to take them. The rails of the digital dollar would belong to someone else, and the United States would spend the next 20 years watching its own currency get reissued by a foreign jurisdiction it could not control. The dollar would still exist, but it would no longer be the one that moved. So the United States picked the second option: rewire the industry, make every stablecoin issuer a forced buyer of the American Treasury, make every digital dollar minted into a fresh loan to the US government, turn the rebellion into infrastructure, quietly, legally, without anyone outside the Treasury Department really noticing what had just happened. The crypto press celebrated a regulatory win. The Treasury celebrated something else entirely. That is the inversion. The technology built to escape the dollar was bolted to its foundation. The threat became the shield. And the shield, as you will see in the next chapter, is now growing fast. Faster than almost any sovereign reserve in the world. It feeds the Treasury. It funds the deficit. It buys American debt while you sleep. And it has a name. The Genius Act. Signed July 18, 2025. Bipartisan, 308 to 122 in the House, 68 to 30 in the Senate. Almost nobody outside crypto noticed. The press called it a stablecoin bill. The Treasury knew better. They knew exactly what they had just built. Next, the exact mechanism, and the math that makes every digital dollar a forced loan to the US government. The Genius Act is 27 pages of dry legal language. Most of it does not matter, but one rule does. Every dollar of stablecoin in circulation must be backed, 1-to-1, by approved assets. And the list of approved assets is brutally short. So short, in fact, that the law might as well have a different title. The Quiet Treasury Buyer Mandate. That is what it actually is. The name on the cover is just decoration. Stablecoin reserves can be held in 3 categories: United States cash in insured bank accounts, short-term US Treasury bills, or repurchase agreements backed by short-term Treasury bills. That's the whole list. No corporate bonds, no foreign sovereign debt, no private credit, no money market funds outside government securities. The door slams shut on every other asset class. If you want to issue a legal stablecoin in the United States, you buy American debt, period. Now look at the math. A company wants to issue $100 billion in digital tokens. By federal law, it must hold $100 billion in approved reserves. Cash earns nothing. Treasury bills earn yield. The choice writes itself. Every issuer, every quarter, picks treasuries, because picking anything else means leaving billions of dollars on the table. The law does not order them to buy government debt. The economics of the law do it for them. Then comes the second clause. And this is the trap that almost nobody outside the bill saw coming. Stablecoin issuers cannot pay interest to the people holding their tokens. 0. Not 1 cent of yield passes to the user. Every dollar of treasury yield earned on the reserves stays with the issuer. That is the price of being legal in America. The user holds a digital dollar. The company holds the yield. Read that twice. The user holds a digital dollar that earns nothing. The company holds a real dollar, invested in US treasuries, earning real interest. The user pays for safety. The company pockets the yield. And the US Treasury sells more debt than it could have otherwise. 3 winners. 1 slow surrender on the user side, and nobody seems to mind, because the user got what they wanted. A dollar that moves like the internet. This is what the Genius Act actually does. It does not regulate crypto the way the headline said. It conscripts it. Every digital dollar minted under the law is a forced loan to the US government. Every transaction settled on these rails feeds treasury demand. The machine is silent. The machine never stops. And the machine grows every time someone in Lagos, Buenos Aires, or Jakarta moves money on-chain. The user thinks they are escaping their local currency. They are, in fact, buying American debt. Critics had a name for this while the bill was being debated. They called it stealth quantitative easing. The Treasury would not need to print money. It would not need to beg China to buy more bonds. It just needed to let private crypto companies grow, and the law would do the rest. The pump operates itself. The pump is global. The pump never sleeps. Next, the numbers that almost nobody believed. On November 24, 2025, the European Central Bank released a quiet report. It was technical, it was dry, and it contained one number that should have shocked every newspaper in the world. The stablecoin market had jumped from $200 billion to $309 billion in 4 months. And those issuers had bought $109 billion in US Treasury bills to back the growth. Let that sit for a moment. $109 billion in US government debt, bought in 4 months, by a handful of crypto companies, most of them less than 10 years old. To put that in context, that volume is larger than the annual treasury purchases of most G7 nations. The buyers are not pension funds. They are not sovereign wealth funds. They are not central banks. They are software companies issuing digital tokens that did not exist a decade ago. And nobody outside the Treasury Department seems to find this remotely strange. Now break it down by day. $109 billion divided by 120 days. That equals $908 million. Every single day, including weekends, including holidays. That is the rate at which crypto issuers are now funding the United States government. Roughly the size of a small American city's annual budget. Purchased before lunchtime. Every day, while most of the country sleeps, while the news cycle covers other things. The mechanism is, by design, completely invisible to the people it serves. And the kicker is, this was already happening before the law took effect. In 2024, Tether had a quiet milestone. The company behind the largest stablecoin became the 7th largest buyer of US treasuries on the planet. As a single private firm, it bought more US government debt that year than Canada, Mexico, Germany, and Norway. More than several developed nations combined. By December 2024, Tether held $94 billion in treasury securities. By October 2025, that number had climbed to $135 billion. The acceleration is steeper than China's biggest buying decade. On November 12, 2025, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent spoke at the Treasury Market Conference in New York. He told the audience something they already knew. Treasury auction sizes would not need to grow. The demand was already coming in, quietly, through stablecoins. He projected the stablecoin market would hit $3 trillion by 2030 and save the United States government roughly $114 billion a year in interest costs. That is one of the largest single fiscal levers ever created without raising a single tax. $114 billion saved every year. For context, that is roughly the entire defense budget of South Korea, funded not by taxes, not by spending cuts, not by foreign creditors, but by the silent, federally mandated demand of digital dollar tokens being minted by private companies across the globe. The bond vigilantes of the 1990s used to scare presidents. The new bond machine never shows up to the meeting. It does not need to. It is built into the architecture of the law itself. Outside projections are even larger. JP Morgan estimates the stablecoin market will hit $500 billion by 2028. Standard Chartered says $2 trillion by 2028. Bernstein projects $4 trillion by 2035. Brookings estimates stablecoins could generate $2 trillion in new treasury demand alone. At that scale, stablecoin issuers would rival China and Japan as the largest foreign holders of US debt, a category of buyer that did not legally exist 3 years ago, reshuffling the global hierarchy of who funds America without a single international negotiation. The International Monetary Fund put it more bluntly in July 2025. Stablecoins, the IMF wrote, could become a digital pillar, strengthening what economists call the exorbitant privilege of the US dollar, a private industry born in opposition to the dollar, now described in official documents as one of its main support beams. The empire has new infrastructure. The construction never stops. And every smartphone in Lagos, Manila, or Mexico City is now, indirectly, a node in the system. The part of this story that keeps central bankers awake at night. This story has a counterweight, and it lives inside the bond market. Every treasury strategist on Wall Street will tell you the same thing. What works going up can break going down. The shield is built on one fundamental assumption, that stablecoin holders will keep holding. If panic hits, if a single major issuer breaks its peg, even briefly, the assumption breaks. And what breaks with it could shake the global financial system. The skeptic's case starts here, and it has historical evidence to support it. Consider what happens during a stablecoin run. The token loses its $1 peg. Users panic. They demand redemption. The issuer must sell its treasury holdings, fast, to pay them back. Selling tens of billions of dollars in short-term government debt over a few days does not happen gently. Yields spike, prices crash, liquidity dries up, and the global plumbing of US debt starts to crack. That is the most important short-term market in the world. The Federal Reserve has wargamed this scenario. Privately, repeatedly, they have not published the results. There is precedent. In March 2023, Silicon Valley Bank collapsed. Circle, the company behind USDC, held a portion of its reserves at that bank. The USDC token broke its peg within hours. It dropped to 87 cents. The federal government had to step in and guarantee all SVB depositors to stop the panic. Now imagine the same shock, but at 5 times the size, with a law that makes treasury bills the only allowable reserve. The skeptic's corner question is simple. What happens when the shield itself becomes the trigger? There is a verdict on this story. It does not come from a crypto blog. It does not come from a Wall Street trader. It comes from inside the Federal Reserve System itself. In March 2026, the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond published an economic brief on stablecoins. The brief is technical. The brief is restrained. The brief is written for economists and policymakers. It is not the kind of document anyone outside that world ever reads. And inside it sits one conclusion that should be read very slowly. Crypto, once treated as a challenge to the dollar, has been rewired. Under the Genius Act, it becomes a force that strengthens the dollar instead. The mainstream press did not cover this brief. It did not need to. The numbers were already telling the story. A force that strengthens it. That is the official position of one of the 12 regional Federal Reserve banks. The thing crypto was supposed to destroy has been rewired into the thing that holds it up. The empire learned. The empire absorbed. The empire wrote a law that turned its biggest threat into its most efficient buyer. And the people building that buying machine still believe they are part of a revolution. Many of them. A revolution against the dollar. They are not. They are part of its newest defense. The revolution did not fail. It was simply reassigned. The threat became the tool. The tool became the structure. The structure became the law. This is not the first time an empire has done this. Rome did it with barbarian armies. The Visigoths, the Vandals, the Goths, tribes that had been raiding Roman borders for generations. Rome did not destroy them. Rome hired them. It paid the very forces that threatened it to defend it instead. The strategy worked for 200 years. Britain did the same with foreign capital in the 19th century, pulling rival nations into the city of London, making them stakeholders, not enemies. The United States did it with the petrodollar in the 1970s. Every barrel of oil sold worldwide became a vote for the dollar. Each absorption looked different. Each followed the same logic. Make the threat dependent on your survival. Then it stops being a threat. And the United States, in 2025, just did it again. Cleaner than before, faster than before, with code instead of contracts. Here is the part you should sit with. In the old order, 3 institutions defended the dollar: the Federal Reserve, the Treasury, a handful of allied central banks. That was the public-facing system, the system you could see, the system with a face, a chair, a press conference. The new defender of the dollar has no chair. It has no press conference. It does not show up at G20 meetings. It is a private crypto company, or several of them, run by people most Americans cannot name, headquartered in places like El Salvador, the British Virgin Islands, and the Cayman Islands, earning yield off your tokens, funding your government, without ever showing up to vote, without ever needing to. They do not need to be elected. They were never elected in the first place. The dollar's most loyal defenders, by 2030, may be entities the average American has never heard of. That is not a flaw of the system. That is the design. Every person holding a stablecoin is now part of a loan to the US government, by federal mandate. They do not get a tax form. They do not get interest. They do not get a vote. They get a token that holds its value, and the architecture beneath them, invisible, automatic, irreversible, funnels their economic activity into American debt. A merchant in Lagos sending payment to a supplier. A trader in Manila moving capital across borders. A freelancer in Buenos Aires receiving income that local banks could never deliver. Every transaction. A thin contribution to a treasury auction they will never see. The empire used to need armies for this. It used to need diplomats. It used to need trade agreements. Now it needs an app. The merchant in Lagos does not know. The trader in Manila does not know. The freelancer in Buenos Aires does not know. They were never told. There is no disclosure. There is no notification. The token works. That is all anyone needs to know. And the full effect has not yet arrived. The Genius Act's complete implementation lands in early 2027. That is when the final rules take force across all federally overseen stablecoin issuers. Mandatory audits for any issuer above $50 billion. Tighter rules on which treasury maturities count as reserves. Analysts at Standard Chartered project the stablecoin market hits $2 trillion by 2028. Brookings projects $2 trillion in additional treasury demand. JP Morgan projects roughly $1.5 trillion in new dollar demand by 2027. None of these projections requires the United States to convince anyone of anything. The mechanism is on autopilot. The mechanism is global. The mechanism wakes up before the markets do. There is another player to mention here: China, Russia, the BRICS nations. The countries that have spent the last decade trying to build alternatives to the dollar. They built BRICS Pay. They expanded the yuan in trade. They priced oil in rupees. They were winning the de-dollarization war on paper. Then the United States passed the Genius Act, and suddenly, the digital rails they wanted to capture were being absorbed by their adversary in real time. The harder they pushed against the dollar, the more stablecoins their citizens used to escape sanctions. And each escape, by law, funded the very government they were trying to weaken. The de-dollarization narrative did not die. It just got an opponent it did not see coming. So the question stops being whether crypto threatens the dollar. The question becomes something else. Is this a masterstroke, a quiet engineering feat that bought America another generation of monetary dominance? Or is this a new systemic fault line, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the first run, the first panic, the first cascade in the bond market? The bond market is watching. The Federal Reserve is watching. And the empire is betting that the shield holds. We do not yet know what they bet on. Neither does the Treasury. Neither does the Fed. But the system is now too large to unwind without consequences. Remember the original promise of crypto: sovereign individuals, borderless money, freedom from central banks, freedom from inflation, freedom from government control of currency. The promise still exists in the marketing. The product still uses the same vocabulary, but the wiring underneath was changed in July 2025. The escape route, on closer inspection, runs directly through the United States Treasury. And the Treasury, on closer inspection, is now the largest beneficiary of every attempted escape. The rebels did not lose. They were not crushed. They were not banned. They were absorbed. And the institutions they were rebelling against now collect rent on every transaction they make. Last episode, the dollar was losing its throne. This episode, the dollar found new defenders. Not in foreign capitals, not in central bank vaults, but in the lines of a 2025 law. And in the smartphones of strangers. The empire did not collapse, it rewired. And the technology that was supposed to bury it is now, quietly, holding it up. The rebellion now funds the empire. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Masterstroke, or fault line waiting to crack. Tell me below. This is Curious Minds. See you next time.